They're the cutest. I'm almost jealous.
We are talking about Punisher Season 2 on Netflix, and this is going to be a review of the whole season. I'm going to pretty much make this spoiler free, so don't worry too much if you haven't seen it. I'm not really going to be talking about too many plot points other than just a kind of a general overview. And realistically, this is probably the last time we'll ever see a live action Punisher, because Disney's kind of like bringing everything home, and all the other Netflix shows have cancelled, so it's unlikely that this one will go any further than this. Who knows, it might happen, but don't hold your breath. So, Season 2 of The Punisher. This, in a way, it reminds me a little bit of Daredevil Season 2, in the fact that it has two kind of separate storylines that kind of like go in and out of focus in regards to whatever throughout the season. So with the original Season 2 of Daredevil, which actually introduced the Punisher, you had the Punisher storyline, and then you had the Hand storyline, and the kind of like episode would, you know, a few episodes were dedicated to the Punisher, a few episodes dedicated to the Hand, and this does the same sort of thing. So you have these two kind of concurrent storylines that are really pretty separate, in all honesty. I mean, there's a little bit of crossover, but not a lot. So they are two completely separate kind of storylines. The first one, which you probably see in the marketing, it deals with Billy Russo, played by Ben Barnes once again, who plays Jigsaw, one of the, if not the Punisher's probably most famous villain. And here he is, kind of returning from the last season to try and get revenge. You know, he's kind of lost his memory, so it's a case of him having a character arc ultimately, and trying to kind of like come to terms with his relationship with Frank Castle, and kind of building up his own army of kind of like disillusioned war vets. Then we have the kind of our secondary storyline, which I preferred, I have to say, where we have this kind of a some people of influence have for reasons that will kind of get through the series, want to take out this young girl, want to basically assassinate this kind of like this young sort of teenage girl, and Frank Castle just happens to kind of like get in the way, and ultimately sort of becomes her protector. And there is this kind of like kind of like an assassin guy who's very kind of a religious kind of theme to him. I wonder if it's based off the Preacher character a little bit. I'm not sure if this character is actually one from the comics, or whether it's just kind of adapted loosely from one who I think maybe it is from. But anyway, he is played by the guy who's the Collector, whose name escapes me now, Josh someone. And yeah, he's kind of like this kind of religious zealot who is pretty capable of it himself, actually. The kind of the interesting thing of this show, this season, there's a lot of kind of influences from other movies. Episode 3, for example, you'll have almost a kind of an episode which is a remake of Assault on Precinct 13. And then there are shades of Leon, aka The Professional, as the movie progresses. We have this kind of relationship with the Punisher and this kind of teenage girl. Less of the kind of the funny stuff in this one, but it just reminded me. And there's some shots, particularly when they're kind of walking up the street, that are straight out of Leon, and that kind of relationship, that father kind of daughter relationship, in this one at least, that kind of builds up, and you have that kind of that kind of thing going on. So that was pretty good. So that's all I'll really say on the plot. What worked for me? So I think Jon Bernthal seemed a little softer in this series than he did in the first one. So he's a little bit more nuanced. He goes off the deep end a few times in this season, but to me his character had seemed to be a little bit more reflective. Not quite to the point where he was just angry all the time like he was in the first season. So his character is a little bit more subdued to a certain degree. It's possibly because in the first few days of filming, Jon Bernthal broke his hands whilst filming. So they've kind of dialed it down a little bit of the action on some sequences. But I quite like it. I thought Bernthal was actually this is the best he's been. And what I liked about this as well, this is to the Netflix version of The Punisher. This to me was the closest you got to the comics, if you ask me. because as much as I enjoyed the first season of The Punisher and his kind of bit on Daredevil, it was very focused on the kind of the military angle. And The Punisher to me has always been a guy who has been fighting crime and mobsters. Yeah, he's had that military background, but his main adversaries was crime rather than kind of the military. And although there is a degree of this with the kind of the obviously Ben Barnes' character, it just seems like it's just a bit more to do with crime and that sort of thing. So a bit more of the kind of the classic style Punisher, if you ask me. So that was good. We have a few returning cast members, and I did miss. I will say who isn't in it, and that is Micro, which was a little bit disappointing because I really enjoyed his character in the first season, and I liked the interaction between him and the Punisher. So he's not in this season, but he's replaced by this new sort of teenage girl who initially did grate me a little bit, but I think she's designed to. But I actually quite liked her as the season progressed, and as we get towards the end of the season, I really did kind of quite like her and the kind of her relationship with Frank Castle, and it was actually kind of quite sweet, and you actually felt like there was some emotional impact with both characters, and kind of and this is what I mean again with Frank Castle softening a little bit. He kind of almost sees her as a surrogate daughter and kind of has these kind of emotional connections, which he didn't really have because he was so bitter about obviously his family and everything. So that was quite good. There's some really great action set pieces in this season. I really did enjoy. I thought the action was absolutely handled fantastically. I mean, the other thing as well, this movie, I keep calling it a film. This series is probably the most brutal out of any of the Netflix. There is some really quite horrific, as they go towards the end of the season, there's some quite horrific injuries in this one. There's a couple of scenes where people take some severe head trauma and it looks pretty gross. And the other thing that was good as well, pretty much every main character, including the bad guys, get put through the absolute ringer in regards to physical damage happening to them. When we get to the final couple of episodes, pretty much every character in this series is virtually kind of the Walking Dead with the amount of damage they have taken. So literally everyone has been absolutely battered. Like I said, there's some returning characters. The one I actually enjoyed the most was Mahoney, who is this kind of the detective, I think first introduced in the Daredevil show. And he's actually quite heavy presence in this season. So that was really good. I really enjoyed him. And yeah, I actually thought, to be honest with you, this is one of the best seasons of the Netflix kind of like Marvel properties that we've had so far. Anything I didn't like? Okay, so I'm going to say the middle of this season lags. And I feel the Billy Russo stuff takes a little time to get going. Because it's having these two concurrent storylines, I feel the Billy Russo side of stuff doesn't really get going until the kind of the second half of this season, and it takes a long time to get there. And you feel it's just treading water when we kind of get into kind of episodes sort of 4 and 5, sort of the early mid section of this kind of this season. So it became a little bit of a kind of, those scenes became a little bit tiresome to a certain degree, because you just felt like it was just sort of spinning its wheels a little bit. But that's really the only critique I'll sort of say with it. Like I said, maybe with the exception of Micro was such a good character in the first one, I would have liked to have seen him come back for at least one episode. But I really enjoyed this series actually. I mean, it was, like I said, a few kind of like dull moments here and there. And you know, there's some obvious kind of movie references I actually kind of enjoyed. This was a really great season for me. And what was also good about it, without kind of giving anything away, it ends in a satisfactory manner. That if they didn't make any more of these, I feel like there's not all these kind of like unanswered questions that have to be answered. So I thought that was kind of quite good. So yeah, I would recommend this season, but it is fairly violent, even more so than the other ones. So you know, if you thought you couldn't take Kingpin banging in someone's head against a car, this one outdoes that. So I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed this season. I thought it was really good. Really strong season for me. I haven't read any other reviews on this before I'd done mine, so I don't know what the general feeling is about season 2, so there you go. But I liked it. 8 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.